You live on the road, man, you have to have a family on the road. And you have to have people you can count on, rely on, that are loyal and what have you, and trustworthy, and not have to look over your shoulder. And he's that kind of guy.
He's worthless. That is the kind of thing that never gets said out loud in a boardroom. But in Vince McMahon's world, it did not need to be said out loud. It just happened. One day, you were on the roster. Next day, you were gone. And in some cases, you were gone for good. The door closed. The phone stopped ringing. Your merchandise disappeared from the shelves. And your name quietly faded from every record book the company kept. That was how Vince McMahon handled the people he was done with. Not with a loud announcement, with silence. June 2025, that cold reality hit Carlito hard. If you are enjoying this story, do us a quick favor right now and use the hype feature on this video. Give it some hype. It helps this channel grow and tells us you want more story like this one. Now, let us keep going. WWE told Carlito his contract would not be renewed. There was no long back and forth. No real negotiation sitting across a table. No meaningful conversation about what might be changed to make things work. Decision had been made. The door was closed. Carlito, who had come back to the company for a genuine second chance and had delivered real moments during his time with the Judgment Day, found himself on the outside again. Carlito's situation in 2025 was just the most recent example of a pattern that had been running through WWE for decades. Vince McMahon spent 5 decades building WWE into the biggest wrestling organization that has ever existed on this planet. He turned regional professional wrestling into a global entertainment operation. He created genuine stars from ordinary people and protected those stars with the full force of his machine. He made enormous amounts of money. He was brilliant in the ways required to build a business from nothing and ferocious in the ways required to protect it once it existed. But with all that power came a set of expectations so clear and so firm that breaking them had consequences that lasted for years or permanent. Vince McMahon had a long memory. He kept a mental record of the people who had crossed him, embarrassed his company, walked out on him, gone to rival companies, or built competing businesses with the knowledge they had gained inside his operation. Once a name went on that list, getting off it was close to impossible. He was not the kind of man who forgot when someone had cost him money, embarrassed the company he had sacrificed decades to build, or used their positions inside his operation as leverage against him. He valued loyalty above almost everything. He rewarded the people who gave it without reservation. And for the people who chose a different path, he had an answer that was simple, consistent, and lasting. The door was always somewhere in the building. Once he decided you had used up your welcome, he walked you to it and closed it behind you. This is the story of 10 of those names. We are going through them from number 10 all the way down to number 1. These are the wrestlers Vince McMahon said he would never hire again. Number 10, Carlito. Carlito had something that cannot be taught and cannot be manufactured. He had natural charisma. That's cool. Character was distinct and original. He had timing. He had charm. He had an ease in front of the camera that took other performers years of grinding in front of small crowds to develop. And even then, most of them never quite found it. When Carlito first came through WWE's doors, there was real excitement in certain corners of the company about what he could become. But the relationship between Carlito and the company ran into serious friction early. By 2010, WWE had reached the end of its patience with how things were going. Vince McMahon brought him in for a direct and honest conversation about his attitude and his work ethic. The message from the company was simple and clear. The approach needed to change if Carlito was going to stay. The company was willing to keep him if he was willing to meet them. But the conditions had to shift. Carlito made his position equally clear. He was not going to change his approach. He was not interested in becoming a different performer to satisfy what management wanted from him. Character he had built, the way he operated, the style he had developed, that was what he brought to the table. If the company did not want that, then the company did not want him. So WWE let him go. He spent roughly a decade away from WWE after that first exit. He kept working. He kept performing. He He stayed connected to the wrestling world, but the WWE door was closed. Triple H took over creative direction of the company. The changes that came with that transition was a willingness to bring back talent that had been shown the exit under the previous regime. Carlito got called. He returned to WWE in 2022 and became part of the Judgment Day storyline, working alongside some of the hottest acts in the company at the time. Fans were glad to see him. The character connected again. Genuinely looked for a stretch like this second run might be the one that finally delivered what the first run promised. Then in June 2025, the contract was not renewed. No negotiation, just a decision. Carlito went public with his feelings about how the situation had played out. He said in a 2025 interview, "Hunter is not a fan of Carlito. I think he gets me personally, but I don't think he gets Carlito or the character. Going to get prioritized and I'm not going to get pushed. So it is what it is." That quote is disarmingly honest. Carlito was not pretending everything ended on good terms. He was saying plainly and directly that the person making the key decisions at the top of the company never fully understood or appreciated what the Carlito character offered. And in WE, if the person at the top does not believe in your character, a push does not come. Without a push, a contract renewal is simply a countdown to another exit. 2 runs, 2 exits. Carlito's story is the quietest kind of entry on this list. No physical confrontation, no rival company founded to compete with WWE, no dramatic public war of words, just a character that never quite got the full support it deserved from the top of the organization. And 2 endings that both arrived the same way, quietly, with the door closing while he was still trying to make his case. Number 9, Ryback. Ryback had a rise inside WE that felt special and real. Feed me more chants were some of the loudest crowd reaction heard in arenas during his push. He was physically intimidating in the exact way WWE has always responded to. He had presence. The audience reacted to him organically, which is the thing that is hardest to manufacture and most valuable when it actually happened. For a period during the early 2010s, Ryback appeared to be on a clear trajectory toward a significant role in the company for the long term. The reality of what was happening behind the scenes was completely different from what people were watching on television every week. His Feed Me More merchandise line, the branded gear that fans were buying and wearing to shows, was cancelled while he was still being pushed actively on television. Detail matters. When a company pulls the merchandise connected to your name and your character while still using you prominently on screen, the message is unmistakable. They are using your name without investing in your brand. They are taking the short-term value you bring to television without committing to building anything lasting around you. It's a loud signal delivered in a quiet way. Injury protocols were reportedly not being followed properly during his time with the company. When Ryback needed proper medical care and appropriate recovery time away from the ring, those concerns were being set aside to keep him on the schedule. His physical well-being was being subordinated to the demands of the booking calendar. When his contract came up and Ryback came to the table to negotiate better terms, the response he received from WWE was not what he had hoped for. According to his own account, they threatened to deliberately book him to lose every single match until his deal expired, damaging his standing and his market value before releasing him anyway. The threat was designed to punish him for asking for more. Ryback was not going to allow that to happen. He made his position clear in plain terms, and then he did what he felt he needed to do. He walked out. He left St. Louis before the contract had officially run its full course. He went home. He put it simply, "I walked out of St. Lou and I went home, tried to stop my pay, and they weren't going to pay me while I rode out my contract." On August 8th, 2016, WWE officially removed Ryback from their roster, and he has not appeared there since. The specific threat of being booked into losing streak after losing streak as punishment for contract negotiations represents a very particular kind of cold corporate decision. It says the company is willing to spend money hurting your value just to send a message. Ryback chose to leave rather than be made an example of. In Vince's world, that choice had permanent consequences. What made Ryback's situation particularly frustrating from the outside was that the audience investment in him had been real. The crowd had chosen to get behind the Feed Me More character on their own. Kind of organic reaction is the thing WWE spends enormous resources trying to create artificially. When you have it happening naturally and the company's behind the scenes decisions cannot match the energy the audience is giving you, something has gone wrong with how the business is being run. Ryback was the symptom of a larger issue inside the company at that time regarding how they handled talent in the middle of genuine momentum. Number 8, Hulk Hogan. For most of professional wrestling's history, across multiple eras and countless changes in the business, there was one name that sat above all others inside Vince McMahon's company: Hulk Hogan. Hulkamania did not just contribute to WWE's growth. It was the engine of WWE's transformation from a regional wrestling organization into a globally recognized entertainment brand. Hogan put professional wrestling on talk show sofas and the covers of mainstream magazines and primetime television slots across the world. He was the reason tens of millions of people who had never watched wrestling before started watching. He was the most important talent Vince McMahon ever worked, and both of them understood that fully. Their professional relationship spanned decades, included working together, falling out, coming back together, and building enormous things side by side. Whatever complications arose between them over the years, the commercial and cultural significance of what they built together was undeniable. Hogan was irreplaceable in what he meant to Vince's company and to the growth of wrestling as an entertainment form. Then in July 2015, a recording surfaced. The recording captured Hogan using racial slurs in a private conversation. Content was deeply offensive. WWE's response was faster and more sweeping than almost anyone in the wrestling community anticipated. They terminated Hogan's contract. They removed all references to him from their official website, took him out of the Hall of Fame. Within a short period, one of the most celebrated and historically significant names in the company's entire history had been erased from WWE's public face almost entirely. But what told the most about Vince McMahon in that moment was not the speed of the action. It was the specific detail of how the firing was communicated to Hogan personally. Hogan spoke to Sports Illustrated about it later and revealed, "I never talked to Vince. The only person I talked to was Triple H." After 30 plus years of shared professional history, after everything Hogan had contributed to making WWE into what it was, Vince McMahon did not call Hulk Hogan directly when it was over. He sent Triple H to deliver the news on his behalf. 7. CM Punk. CM Punk walked out of WWE on January 27th, 2014, backstage after the Royal Rumble pay-per-view, and he did not look back. The frustrations had been accumulating for a long time before that night. He felt consistently underpaid relative to the work he was doing and the position he held in the company. He believed he had received inadequate medical care from WWE's medical staff at moments when his health needed proper attention. He watched part-time performers, people who worked a handful of dates a year, get positioned above him on the card while he worked the full schedule and got moved down to make room for them. After the Royal Rumble in 2014, whatever was holding him in place finally gave out. He was done. His official release from WWE came by text message, and the specific date of that text message was his wedding day. On the day CM Punk got married, he received a text informing him that his WWE employment was being officially terminated. Detail traveled quickly through the wrestling world. Whatever the business logic of the timing, firing someone via text on the day they get married communicates something clear about the state of the relationship between the company and the person. The human dimension had been completely removed. Then the story took an unexpected turn years later. Somewhere around 2018 or 2019, Vince McMahon personally reached out to CM Punk. Breaking what had been his usual operating approach, Vince called Punk directly and began cutting out the intermediaries between them. A line of communication that had been completely shut since 2014 suddenly opened. Two sides began talking seriously about a potential return. Vince, Triple H, and Punk all came together in person for what Punk described as a clandestine meeting at the Borgata Casino in Atlantic City, New Jersey. They went through the details of what a return might look like. They talked. They worked through things. At the end of those conversations, they shook shook hands on an agreement. Then Vince went completely silent. CM Punk spoke about it on the My Mom's Basement podcast in 2025. He said, "We ended up having a discussion and we shook hands on an agreement, but then he ghosted. That's why it never came to fruition. It's unbelievable. A handshake agreement and then nothing. Call to explain what had changed. No message of any kind, just silence. The agreement went nowhere because the man who had made it simply stopped communicating and never started again." For 6, Mr. Kennedy. Kennedy, whose real name is Ken Anderson, was being positioned inside WWE as a genuine future champion. The faith Vince McMahon had in him was embedded in the character itself. The name Mr. Kennedy was a specific signal. Kennedy referenced Vince's own middle name, as in Vincent Kennedy McMahon. Vince did not name characters after his own middle name by accident. That connection was a mark of personal investment. Anderson was being looked at as someone who could carry significant responsibility at the top of the card. He had the tools to back that up. His microphone work was excellent. He had the physical presence to be believable in main event matches. He had character instincts that translated well on screen. The trajectory of his career inside WWE looked very much like the path toward the top. In May 2009, during a televised match, Anderson performed a belly-to-back suplex. The execution was off. Randy Orton landed on his head and neck in an awkward and dangerous way. Orton was not severely injured, but the spot was genuinely unsafe, and he was shaken by what had happened. What Anderson himself described happening next went beyond a normal backstage complaint. Orton went to WWE management and made a direct formal objection. He stated clearly that he did not want to work with Anderson again. And then Orton brought John Cena into the situation. Cena went directly to Vince McMahon and added his voice to Orton's complaint, backing the account and adding the full weight of his position in the company to it. When the two most trusted names in the company are delivering the same message directly to the person at the top, the result is almost predetermined. Orton addressed it directly later. He said, "Yes, I did tell management I did not want to work with him after that. Who wouldn't?" Anderson had just returned from an injury. He had been on the shelf, worked through rehabilitation, and gotten himself back to active competition. He was 4 days into his return when WWE released him. 4 days back from injury, and his entire career in WWE was finished. He has never appeared in WWE again from that point to the present. 5. Jeff Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett burned his bridge with Vince McMahon not once but twice. His first departure came in 1996 when he left WWE to join WCW. The decision cost WWE talent and momentum during a period when both companies were fighting hard for every inch of ratings advantage. Jarrett came back to WWE in 1997 on a 1-year deal. The bridge was rebuilt, at least enough to function. Vince gave him another opportunity. Jarrett used that opportunity to plan the most calculated exit in his career. By October 1999, his contract had expired and he was heading out of WWE for WCW a second time. But he was also holding the Intercontinental Championship, and WWE had the No Mercy pay-per-view coming up. The company could not send their Intercontinental Champion walking out the door to a rival promotion while still holding the belt. They needed Jarrett to drop the title in his final appearance before he left. Jarrett knew exactly what the situation. He understood the leverage he held in that specific window of time before the show, so he negotiated. According to accounts published by China and Bob Holly in their individual books, the payment demanded and eventually received was approximately $300,000. Vince paid. The match took place. The belt changed hands. Jarrett walked out of the building with his money. Jarrett himself reflected on the moment. He said, "I have zero leverage when I leave today. Today's over." He knew the truth of his own situation completely. The second he left that building, his power over WWE was gone. But in the hours leading up to that show, he had WWE in a position with no good option. He used every second of that position with full awareness of what then he went further than simply leaving. He co-founded TNA Wrestling, a rival company built specifically to offer an alternative to WWE and compete for the audience that Vince considered exclusively his. 4. Bret Hart. The Montreal Screwjob at Survivor Series in November 19 1997 remains the most controversial moment in professional wrestling history. This is the story of a promise broken in front of an entire country, and it fundamentally and permanently defined the relationship between Bret Hart and Vince McMahon for years after it happened. In November 1997, Bret Hart was the WWF champion. He had signed a deal with WCW and was leaving the company. As part of his arrangement with Vince, he had been given creative control over his final appearances. It was a real, meaningful agreement. It gave Bret a genuine say in how his last chapter in WWE would be written before he walked out the door. His final match was scheduled against Shawn Michaels at Survivor Series 1997 in Montreal. It was a significant main event on a major pay-per-view show, and Bret Hart walked into that match believing the finish had been agreed to in advance, consistent with his creative control arrangement. Vince McMahon, positioned ringside, gave referee Earl Hebner a private instruction: ring the bell right now. Hebner called for the bell while Bret Hart was still locked in a submission hold. The match was immediately called. Shawn Michaels was awarded the WWF champion. His creative control had been set aside completely. He had been publicly humiliated in his final WWE match in his home country in front of a live crowd and a television audience. Stage after the match, The Undertaker stepped in. He told Vince McMahon directly that he needed to walk into that locker room and face Bret Hart. He needed to deal with what he had just done. Vince walked in. Bret Hart crossed the room and hit him. Punch connected with Vince's temple and put him on the ground. A slow reconciliation eventually began after Bret suffered a stroke, when perspective on old arguments tends to shift. But what happened in Montreal in November 1997 never fully left either man's public story. Number 3. Randy Savage was one of the greatest performers professional wrestling ever produced. Savage occupied a category the very few have ever reached. His matches combined athleticism and storytelling and spectacle in a way that still holds up completely. His promos were unlike anything else happening in the business at the same time. His character had genuine depth and fire, and a quality that audiences connected to at a deep level. Throughout the Hulkamania era and across the period that followed, Savage was one of the most valuable talents Vince McMahon had under his roof. Their relationship was genuinely close for a long time. Then in the mid-1990s, Savage left WWE for WCW. He went to join Hulk Hogan and the growing roster at the rival company. Vince McMahon did not treat it as a normal business departure. He took it as a deep personal betrayal from someone he had trusted and worked closely with for years. People close to the situation identified a specific commercial detail that focused and deepened Vince's anger in a very direct way. Randy Savage had a major sponsorship deal with Slim Jim. The deal was tied to his persona and his visibility inside WWE's ecosystem. The platform Vince had given Savage was a significant part of what made that sponsorship possible and valuable. Savage left for WCW. The Slim Jim deal went with him. Money and a commercial relationship that had been built on the back of WWE's platform left the building along with the talent who had earned it. For close to 2 decades, Vince enforced what those inside the company described as an unofficial ban on Savage's name within WWE walls. Even after WWE purchased WCW in 2001, bringing Savage back into any official role proved extremely difficult. The Hall of Fame door stayed closed. There were reports that approaches had been made over the years. Mean Gene Okerlund later confirmed that WWE had put real offers on the table. Randy Savage was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2015. He had died 4 years earlier in 2011. He never received that recognition while he was alive and present and able to appreciate. Whatever the full picture of what happened between him and Vince over those lost years, the permanent result of that estrangement was that one of wrestling's all-time greats did not get his flowers from the company he helped build until after he was already gone. Number 2, Nailz. There are heated exits on this list. There are walkouts and disputes and public criticisms and long estrangements. But Nailz sits at number 2 because what he did was categorically different in kind from almost everything else here. He did not leave the company or attack it publicly or take his talent elsewhere. He walked into Vince McMahon's office and put his hands on him. Kevin Wacholtz, who performed in WWE as Nailz during 1992, had a dispute dispute about his pay. He believed the numbers he had received were wrong and that he was owed more than had been paid to him. He went to Vince's office to confront him about it. The confrontation did not stay verbal for long. According to an eyewitness account from Charlie Norris, Nailz grabbed Vince McMahon by the throat. He was actively choking. The grip was serious and the danger was real enough that agents physically had to come in and pull Nailz away from Vince before the situation went further. Norris described it clearly. He said, he asked Vince how come my payoff is so low. He did grab Vince and he was really choking. WWE released Nailz immediately. That outcome was never in any doubt. Physically attacking your employer is not something any organization can absorb, regardless of the grievance that preceded it. The employment ended the moment the incident took place. But that was only the beginning of how this story played out. 1994, Vince McMahon faced a federal steroid trial that attracted widespread national attention and coverage. He told the federal jury that McMahon had personally instructed him to use steroids. He did not moderate his language or his feelings when speaking from the witness stand. He expressed his hatred for Vince McMahon openly and directly in open court, on the record, in front of a federal jury. Vince McMahon was found not guilty. The jury cleared him and the case was closed in his favor. But Nailz had done everything available to him outside the walls of WWE to damage the man who had fired him. Physical attack in his office, testimony against him in federal court, open declaration of personal hatred from a witness stand. There was never any path back for Nailz. The story ended where it ended, and the door that closed on Kevin Wacholz in 1992 never opened again. The Nailz situation also stands alone because of the specific combination of events. Most of the other entries on this list involved one serious incident. Nailz managed two separate and escalating ones. Number one, the Ultimate Warrior. Ultimate Warrior is number one on this list because his story contains the complete and fully assembled version of everything Vince McMahon could not absorb. The financial demand at the worst possible moment. The leverage played deliberately and fully. The formal written declaration that the business relationship was over. And then the strange, revealing contradiction that followed and told you something true about how Vince actually operated when circumstances changed. Before SummerSlam 1991, the Ultimate Warrior reportedly refused to walk through the curtain and perform until Vince McMahon had agreed to a significant financial arrangement. The show was just minutes from starting. The audience was already in the building. Card had been fully promoted and announced. Every match was set, and Warrior was standing firm. He was not moving until the money situation was resolved on his terms. Vince paid. The letters that passed between the two men during that period confirm the full weight of how contentious and extensive those financial discussions had been. The correspondence documents a relationship under serious strain, with both sides making their positions known in formal written terms. Warrior had the leverage of irreplaceability in that specific moment. He applied it completely and without hesitation. After SummerSlam ended and the audience went home, Vince fired Warrior, and he did it with a letter that has been quoted in professional wrestling circles ever since. It contained one of the most famous declarations Vince McMahon ever put to paper. He wrote in that 1991 letter, "Needless to say, you and I will never do business again. You are officially suspended and will not be permitted to appear at any WF event. Sincerely, Vince. We will never do business again." Written, signed, sent. And then Vince rehired the Ultimate Warrior twice. It is the part of the story that makes it unique on this entire list. Vince put those words in a formal letter and signed his name to them. Then, at two separate later points, he brought Warrior back into the company, which tells you something about the gap between what Vince felt in a given moment and what his business instincts eventually required him to do when circumstances shift. But neither rehiring restored what had existed before SummerSlam 1991. The original trust between them, the version of the relationship that predated that night and that letter, was gone. Vince might work with someone again. That was not the same thing as trusting them again. Two concepts were separate in his world, and both people in that relationship understood the difference. Warrior was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in April 2014 and passed passed away just days after that ceremony. The estrangement had softened enough over the years for that recognition to take place. Pattern across these stories reveals exactly what Vince valued and what he could not tolerate. Some of them made mistakes that were entirely their own fault. Some of them had genuine grievances that any fair observer would understand. Some of them were victims of bad timing or bad politics inside a company where both things could end a career faster than any creative decision. But what they all shared was an encounter with the line that Vince McMahon had drawn around what his company would tolerate. And they all found out, some faster than others, that crossing that line had consequences that did not expire. The business of professional wrestling has changed significantly since many of these stories began. The way contracts work, the way talent is developed, the way audiences consume the product has all shifted. But the fundamental truth at the center of every story on this list has not changed. In any organization built around one person's vision, the relationship with that person is the most important one to have. Protect it or lose it completely. These 10 men, in 10 different ways, across 10 different moments, lost it. And in Vince McMahon's world, that meant losing the platform he controlled. For most of them, they never got it back.